Hi, I'm Irene Herford. I'm the clinical director for One Mind, and I'm here with Christopher Palmer, who's a psychiatrist and an assistant professor at Harvard McLean. Hi, Chris. Nice to have you here.
Hi, Irene. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, well, so in the tradition of psychiatrists everywhere, I think I'm going to start with, tell me about your mother. And how your life with her led you to the path that you're on now.
So my mom had two different lives, and they were separated in time about the age of 42 for her. Mm-hmm. And prior to the age of 42, my mother very desperately wanted a simple middle-class lifestyle with a large family. She and my father were both Catholic, and they wanted a large family with 4 kids. Mm-hmm. They ended up with 8 kids. And that was really what she wanted. And then through a series of really horrible and tragic events in her family of origin, she was extraordinarily stressed and had what she called a nervous breakdown. I think in psychiatric terms today, it would have started as severe depression with suicidal ideation. It quickly began to include psychotic symptoms. She became quite delusional. She believed that she was Mary Magdalene. She believed that the world was ending, that a priest that she was going to was Jesus Christ come back for the end of the world. She began to get really paranoid. She became convinced that my father was the devil, like literally. And they ended up divorcing. The courts were not kind to her. She literally lost everything. She lost her business. She got almost no money whatsoever. She got no support. She got no alimony. She lost her home. She lost custody of the 8 kids. She was very suicidal. So I decided to leave my father and 7 brothers and sisters at the age of 13. And I went to live with her because I wanted to save her. And there was a period of time that we were actually homeless together. And my first day of high school was from a homeless shelter. She, after about a year of that, she decided she couldn't take care of me anymore. And I went back to live with my dad. The short end to that story is that my mother never got better. She got psychiatric treatment, but it didn't help her one bit. And I was angry and furious with the mental health field for being so incompetent. And when I saw what happened to her and how her life was devastated, I thought that this was extraordinarily unfair. I was angry at the courts. I was angry at everybody because she was a really good, smart, hardworking person who did not deserve what she got.
Yeah.
I remember how angry I was at the psychiatrists for giving her medications that only made her sedated. They made it so that she couldn't walk a straight line. She said she felt drugged. She looked drugged.
Yeah.
And she was still crazy. They weren't doing anything. And I was furious. And for the last 27 years, I've been on the other side of that equation.
And felt the helplessness that they probably felt.
I'm the one prescribing those pills. I'm the one doing those treatments. And patients aren't necessarily getting better.
I know it. It's a difficult place to be.
It is.
Okay, well, that brings us to your theory of brain energy. Can you describe it for our viewers?
I can. It's audacious, and it will seem shocking, But I am arguing that actually all mental disorders are metabolic disorders of the brain. Mm-hmm. That in order to connect all of the risk factors that we know with certainty based on decades of evidence, mm-hmm. in order to connect to all the risk factors that play a role in mental illness, we actually have to rise above them all. Mm-hmm. We know that they are different in different people. We know that different brain regions are affected in different people with the exact same diagnosis. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't make them less real. The people are exhibiting the same symptoms. And so instead, we need a theory that can integrate all of the risk factors, mm-hmm. and that can explain why would these risk factors come together in a biological way to cause the brain to malfunction.
Okay.
And in essence, that is what the brain energy theory does.
Okay. Can you tell us how metabolism, and you go on to talk about in your book, mitochondrial functioning, actually does tie all of sort of mental disorders together?
You know, on the surface, metabolism and mitochondria are different things. Mm-hmm. So metabolism is really fundamental to the definition of life. Mm-hmm. And so in that respect, of course, mental disorders are related to metabolism. Anything biological has to be related to metabolism somehow or another. And in fact, researchers have identified metabolic abnormalities in the brains and bodies of people with mental disorders since the 1940s. Mm-hmm. This is nothing new. Yeah. We have known about differences in lactate, in glucose metabolism, mm-hmm. in oxidative stress, and all sorts of other metabolic biomarkers mm-hmm. since the 1940s. And we've been doing all these brain imaging studies, identifying differences in brain function in different people. And almost all of the functional brain studies are measuring brain metabolism. That's what they're measuring. Mm-hmm. So at first glance, saying that mental disorders are metabolic disorders offers nothing new. Most people who actually are experts in this space would say, well, that doesn't really tell us anything. Of course, they're related to metabolism. But when you take a larger perspective of, well, what is controlling metabolism? Mm-hmm. And what does it even mean to have a metabolic disorder? What does a metabolic disorder mean? Mm-hmm. And make no mistake, metabolic disorders are real.
Oh, yeah.
We call them obesity and type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. Mm-hmm. And it turns out people with mental illness are more likely to have those disorders. And it turns out people with those disorders are more likely to have mental illness. Mm-hmm. And when you ask big picture questions like that, like what is metabolism? What's controlling it? What does it mean to have metabolic dysfunction? It leads you to mitochondria. And over the last 25 years, the scientific field has exploded in terms of helping us better understand exactly all of the different roles that mitochondria play in cells. Mm-hmm. And when you do a deep dive into the science of all of those roles, you start to learn that mitochondria are actually the primary regulators of neurotransmitters and neurotransmitter release. You learn that mitochondria are actually the primary regulators of hormones like cortisol, estrogen, and testosterone. You learn that mitochondria are primary regulators of inflammation. Mitochondria are primary regulators of the function and structure and development of cells. And when you understand that, you can begin to connect all of the risk factors for mental illness. And when you look at the big picture and ask yourself, well, what happens if a cell doesn't have enough mitochondria? Or if those mitochondria are somehow deficient? You actually end up with a fairly simplistic model of how a cell can malfunction. And it's interesting because it can be polar opposites. A cell can become underactive when it is metabolically compromised. But fascinatingly, a cell can become overactive when it is metabolically compromised. And those explanations and those concepts help us piece together how all of the risk factors for mental illness fit together. They converge on mitochondria. And if you understand that mitochondria can become dysfunctional, you can begin to understand why certain regions of the brain might be overactive or underactive. And that results in symptoms that we call mental illness.
Okay. So how did you come to this? What was your eureka moment where it all sort of converged for you?
You know, there were a few eureka moments along the way. I think the first one was when I helped a patient with schizoaffective disorder lose weight. My goal was to help him lose weight.
Right.
And we decided to try the ketogenic diet. And within 2 weeks, not only was he losing weight, but I began to notice dramatic and remarkable reduction in his psychiatric symptoms. That process led me to understand that the ketogenic diet is actually an epilepsy treatment. And we use epilepsy treatments all the time in psychiatry.
Yes.
And it turns out we've got decades of neuroscience on how the ketogenic diet affects brain function. And so that ended up leading me to mitochondria. Mitochondria led me to understanding all of these new powerful roles of mitochondria and their influence over inflammation and neurotransmitters and hormones. And I'm thinking, it can't be this simple. There can't be one place in the cell or in the human body that all of these things converge, because this is what we've been looking for in psychiatry all along. We've been trying to understand, why are hormones dysregulated in people with mental illness? The biggest eureka moment for me was that early on I really struggled with a conundrum. And that is that we prescribe medications that cause metabolic harm. And we know that with certainty. It's on the package insert. We prescribe medications that cause weight gain, that cause type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, premature mortality, at least in the elderly, and that cause neurological problems. And we know, based on decades of research, that the medications are actually impairing mitochondrial function. And that was extraordinarily confusing and perplexing for me early on. I was like, this can't be then. Because we have all these clinical trials showing that they reduce symptoms. So how can I make sense of this?
And how did you?
It was the paradox of metabolic dysfunction in a cell can lead to underactivity or overactivity. Hyperexcitability is what it's called in the neuroscience literature. And when a cell is hyperexcitable, there are kind of two ways to fix it. One would be to help restore its health and give it more energy. But while you're trying to do that, it might make the cell hyperexcitable again, which means symptoms, psychiatric symptoms. The other way to stop a hyperexcitable cell is to basically shut it down. If you impair energy going to that cell will have less hyperexcitability. And that is the paradox, that treatments that we prescribe, even though they cause metabolic harm, may reduce symptoms, at least in the short run.
Well, that actually brings me to my next question, which is some of your thoughts around antipsychotics specifically, and some anti-epileptics as well, might frighten people off from using them. And yet, as you point out, sometimes they're life-saving for people, at least in the short run. So can you say more about how you do make use of them and how you don't?
So first of all, I want to say, if anybody is on psychiatric medications and they want to reduce them or stop them, they must do this with the help of the medical professional. It is extraordinarily dangerous and sometimes life-threatening to stop your meds cold turkey. You're a psychiatrist, I'm a psychiatrist. We've seen it many times.
Yes.
It is a nightmare.
Yeah.
It is dangerous. Please don't do it.
Agreed.
There's no doubt that mental disorders can lead to situations that are dangerous and life-threatening. People can be suicidal, they can be agitated, they can be combative. And this can be dangerous to both themselves and people around them. And in those situations, safety is of utmost importance. And it is important to use any means necessary to keep those people safe. And there is no doubt antipsychotic medications play a role in that. I'm a licensed psychiatrist right now. I don't have the authority or even the ethical right to go against standards of care, and I don't. And the standard of care is to use antipsychotics in certain situations as a first-line treatment. And I continue to do that to this day. What I am hoping is that this theory and the science that it might inform may change our field, may really result in a paradigm shift. And maybe 10 or 20 years from now, we will use different approaches to somebody who comes in with a non-dangerous psychotic episode.
Okay. And so if somebody comes into your office with a non-dangerous psychotic episode, do you start them on the ketogenic diet at that point, or do you wait? Like, how do you incorporate the ketogenic diet into your treatment? And I saw that you had lots of treatment things. It was not simply ketogenic diets, but that was, I think, one of your eureka moments. And so I'm curious about how you use it clinically.
So again, I am an evidence-based psychiatrist and a licensed practitioner, and I use evidence-based treatments. I only use the ketogenic diet in people with treatment-resistant illness. When patients come to me with chronic mental disorders and they want to try a metabolic approach to treatment, I will try many metabolic approaches. But as you alluded to, the book is about so much more than the ketogenic diet. The book includes other dietary interventions. But a lot of standard, basic, common sense treatments that everybody knows about directly affect mitochondrial function. Alcohol, marijuana, their primary mechanism of action in the human body and the human brain is actually on mitochondria, believe it or not. And we know they play a role in mental illness. Sleep impairment plays a direct role on metabolism in mitochondria. We know that sleep impairment can cause mental symptoms or exacerbate episodes of mental illness. So it really is about taking a comprehensive, holistic approach to treatment.
Okay, well, so your book provides lots of testable hypotheses. What are a couple that you're most excited about moving forward with?
Already underway, we have at least 5 controlled trials of the ketogenic diet for serious mental illness, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia. I think what I am most probably passionate about testing is this more comprehensive treatment plan. To work with patients and look at all of the factors that might be harming metabolism and work to safely reduce or eliminate those factors. But at the same time, introducing treatments that can augment metabolism or improve metabolism and mitochondrial function to see how many patients we might be able to get better. At this point, I actually believe most patients, certainly more than 50% of patients, could get better with a metabolic treatment approach.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, I wish you luck. I can't wait to see what comes next. It was nice to talk with you.
It was great talking with you. Thank you.